Good evening and welcome to another edition of Mental Health Monday, brought to you by Saving Grace Community Church and Grace House of Cincinnati. Joining me tonight is our resident expert and our road dog on this journey, Dr. Quentin Moss, President, founder, and CEO of Modern Psychiatry. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Good to be here, man.
Well, this month, April, not only is there an emphasis dealing with autism, but it's also National Alcoholism Awareness Month. And tonight, for our topic, it will be Don't Kill My Buzz. Now, back in the day, a buzz is just a high. A buzz is something that you wanted to maintain. You had a little drink in you, and you wanted to keep that going. And you wanted to avoid anybody messing up that high. And so the expression was, yo, please don't kill my buzz. And undoubtedly tonight, someone's buzz may be affected, or someone's desire to get a buzz may cause a person to think a little more heavily about that before they get their buzz on. Mm-hmm. Alcohol is widely popular in our culture and across the world, Dr. Moss, and 117 billion gallons of alcohol are consumed worldwide each year. Wow. Let that sink in.
Yeah.
And, I mean, here in our country, it's believed that $565 per year at least is spent on by individuals, Americans individually consuming alcohol, and by their own accounting, the beverage industry. When you look at over 200 billion liters of liquid, soda, whatever being sold, of that 202 billion liters, alcohol is representative and responsible for 16.5% of the total volume of beverage alcohol. That's just incredible. Mm-hmm. And the pandemic certainly has caused an increased usage, and for many people has been a go-to in terms of trying to cope through the pandemic. And Forbes magazine in January noted that last year that American whiskey sales were up 8.2%, or $327 million to $4.3 billion.
Wow.
Rye remains an important, is a component of whiskey, and sales have gone up almost 17% of rye, from 40 million to reaching almost up to 275 million. Tequila sales are up 17.4%. Cognac up 21.3%. Pre-mixed cocktails driven by spirits or ready to make drinks, mixed drinks are up 39% from $137 million in sales to $489 million.
Wow.
And so the pandemic has further exacerbated a problem for many, and has increased usage where it was popular before. Alcohol was popular before the pandemic, and now its stock literally has really gone all the way. And it's just, alcohol is just a part of our fabric. You can't go anywhere where there's not alcohol involved. And for many people, alcohol is considered to be a party starter or a mood setter. When discussing business, alcohol is present. When dealing with sorrow, alcohol is present.
Yeah.
Toasts are made,
Alcohol is
toast
yeah.
in pledges. It's used as a prop when someone's pledging their unwavering commitment to someone. It's there. You just can't get it. Is it weddings? Is it funerals? Is it graduations? Um, we just love. It's even in some churches. Okay,
That's right.
it
That's right.
is just. It is just. It's just everywhere, and we celebrate it, and it's a part of our fabric. And for many people, when they think about using alcohol, they look at and think about these type settings and celebrations and usage.
Everybody in the club get tipsy. That funky monkey. Oh, fast funky junkie.
For the liquor, I'ma dive.
Hold up.
Frank,
Headshot.
Frank,
Sit down.
Frank.
It's just part of the pop culture. It's part of the hip hop culture. It's part
Yeah.
of every area and aspect of society. And like many things, it sometimes it's not so much the alcohol, but the usage and the behaviors and the situations that develop as a result of one drinking in excess. And so, Dr. Moss, what's an alcoholic?
There's a definition that we use in mental health and the addiction field, and that speaks a great deal to people who struggle with use, who see their use continue to escalate, and they struggle with not being able to stop their use. Oftentimes, not all the time, they may have a great deal of guilt associated with their use. They find that they have to drink in order for them to feel that they can function during the day, or drink to avoid feeling sick from withdrawal. They tend to struggle with maintaining their personal lives, whether there's a relationships with family or friends, their professional obligations. There's a sense of craving that also goes along with alcohol use. And we tend to see this within a specific period of time. And based on some of those parameters, we're able to say, this person has, alcohol addiction, alcoholism, or what we call now alcohol use disorder. And, Pastor, that affects about 16 million people in this country. 16
Wow.
million.
Wow. It's something because as we look at the use of, alcohol, it's something that we view kind of as being harmless, but there are really in excess in alcoholics and the things that they have to face. It's the consequences are not harmless.
Mm-hmm.
What affects what effects does alcohol have on social behavior?
Oh gosh. So we talked just briefly now about, not being able to manage our responsibilities, not being able to manage our relationships. But for people who continue to drink in excess, it can create significant brain changes where people aren't able to make appropriate decisions. People may become impulsive. People may not be able to, to function and make even decisions about maintaining themselves, even within their homes. People oftentimes can become very disruptive to others. And then when you mix alcohol with doing other things that we typically would casually do, like operating heavy machinery or having dangerous jobs or driving a car, then we increase the risk of ourselves and to other people. Alcohol use tends to, in excess, create greater risk for violent behavior, domestic violence. A lot of those things sometimes are tied to people who are consuming excess amount of alcohol.
As you look at other disorders, is alcoholism often, can it be paired with other disorders?
Mm. Well, we know that people who suffer from depression, various types of anxiety disorders, they're at greater risk for having alcohol use disorder. People who have bipolar disorder, untreated ADHD are at greater risk for having alcohol use disorder. And then, of course, people who unfortunately suffer from trauma also have increased risk of alcohol use disorder. So those disease processes increase the risk for alcohol use disorder, alcoholism. And then alcoholism, as we drink, then can also lead to worsening depression, worsening anxiety, memory problems. Sometimes psychosis can be attributed to, heavy alcohol use. So there's mental health that leads to sometimes alcohol, and then sometimes alcohol can cause a lot of mental health symptoms.
That's interesting because, I mean, you hear a lot of people say that are going through some things that I need a drink to take the edge off. I need to get wet. I need to become numb to what I'm dealing with. But it's used to take the edge off and to lift your spirit, but it's considered a depressant. Explain that.
That's right. So alcohol affects, there are certain receptors, GABA receptors. It has an effect on opioid receptors, which affect the release of dopamine. And what the alcohol use does, it slows things down. It slows down our mentation. It does eventually start to dampen our mood. It slows down our reflexes. So it takes whatever our brain does and everything that's connected to it, and it actually puts it at a much lower level. So it is a depressant. And some people may feel that it may lighten that mood, or they may feel, jovial or happy with it. But that effect is actually, short-lived. After you've had the rush of dopamine to go through from the release of endorphins, then there's the downside of that. So yeah, it is a depressant.
When a person drinks in excess, or as we'll say, wet or lit, high, has a low beams on, all those expressions of someone being, drunk. But in society, it's not. It seems harmless, but not only is it seems looked and viewed as being harmless, but it also is when we find someone drunk, we get a lot of laughs from the behavior, and it's ever before us, even in the media. Just want to watch this clip of two classic drunks that appeared on two shows over the years that I've come familiar with, and maybe some of our viewers may have come familiar with. This is just a brief clip here.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. Please do not be alarmed. There seems to be some sort of system malfunction here.
Come on, Otis. Come on, get out. Get off. Come on. Move, Pete. Move. Yeah, Pete.
Hold it, partner, hold it. In this country, a man takes care of his horse first.
Even then, but in many instances, it's the source of humor, this comic relief, the behavior one that's drunk. But for those who suffer from or who are in recovery, it's really no laughing matter.
Right.
Statistically, 1 in 8 American adults, or 12.7% of our population, is been diagnosed or could be diagnosed having alcohol use disorder. Tonight, we want to welcome to our show to share his story. David, if you'll unmute yourself there, to share his story. David McKee, and how his life of recovery is going. And so, David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Pastor.
So, David, tonight, just explain to us what your relationship has been with alcohol, and how did it move from being something that you may have done a part of a social use to become something that created more problems for you? And what did those problems look like in your life?
Okay. I started using alcohol as a lot of young people do, with just, at parties, and it was a good time, and, felt good. Actually, before that, though, when I was a little bit younger, I started sneaking a little bit of whiskey out of the family bar and replace that with water so no one would know,
Right.
feeling a little bit of the effects of it.
Mhm.
And then when I started going out with friends, we would drink and go to parties on the weekend and stuff like that in high school. And it became really funny, and we took a certain amount of pride in how much we could drink and things like that, and the trouble that we got into because of it. And it just seemed like a lot of fun at the time.
And so you started off casually drinking. When did it turn serious? When did it become not a laughing matter anymore in your life? When did you stop laughing about it? When did you notice that it was adversely affecting you? At what age?
Well, I started using other substances too.
Okay. Mhm.
And so it was in my early 20s really where people would say, that I had a problem, and they'd say this about me, or they might warn somebody that I was getting involved with, that I had a problem with drugs and alcohol. One friend called my mother at one time and said, he's got a problem with this. And I ended up losing a job and going into treatment, and then maintained sobriety for about a year and a half. Well, no, it was about a year at that time. And then started playing around with things again. And it just became a long struggle over the years. And I have long periods where I might not use alcohol, but I'd use something else.
Mhm.
during that
What
period.
other substance did you use?
Oh, a lot of different kinds of pills, marijuana. I stopped using that for a long time. And I actually stopped using marijuana for a long time. But then when I would use the pills, I had a difficulty taking them as prescribed. I always took more. And it was to create it was a way of dealing with life.
Did your early use of alcohol create a need for a deeper buzz, a more depth high? What led you to go and to expand into doing other things?
Yeah, I don't know really what it was. For me, it was something. It was a way of it just made me feel better, because I guess that I had an underlying depression that I didn't really know about at the time, and heard Dr. Moss talking about an anxiety disorder, and I've been diagnosed with that several times. And so these are things that just made me feel a little more comfortable. And then it just once I started, it just kept going. And I'll jump forward to the last couple of years before I was able to get clean and sober and stay in recovery. That it became a necessity of living. That I have had a job for quite a while during that period of time, until about the last 3 or 4 months. I became unable to work because I just could not. It was such a painful experience to be in society and to be around other people. But yes, I would drink until I passed out or fell asleep, until I was able to sleep. So at that point, I was usually at home alone. And sometimes I would get out, but I was usually at home alone. And then fall asleep for a couple hours, and then wake up and have to drink some more, smoke a little pot, something like that. Fall asleep again, wake up. And it was just an endless cycle. I hated seeing. I look at my windows now, and it's a joy to be able to see outside and see the sunshine, to wake up in the morning. And it had become, at that point, it was miserable. I would see the sun coming through the blinds. I'd hear the birds chirping, and I would just curse that I had to get up. I remember one particular instance. There was I felt bad. I didn't want to drink. I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to feel better. And I was laying there on my couch in my squalor at that point, because it was hard to keep up with the household. And there was a store that not even hardly half a block away. I thought, oh, man, I don't really want to do this, but I've got to go get some beer, you know. And it was all I could take to get out the door. And it felt like I crawled up there, got a six pack, came home, was able to, you know, just kind of calm down a little bit. But when I think about the things that I did that violated my own morals and standards, you know, to maintain that drinking, and I had some good excuses that I thought, you know, because I had the depression. I had been, how do I word this? But just ignored by a big group of people that I had associated with previously. My wife had passed away. And so I had these many different things, you know, that, yeah, I need to do this to feel better. I don't know any other way. And it became at a point where I thought of suicide quite often. In fact, for several years up to that point. I remember working at a garage downtown, and I would go do a security check at the end of the night. And I always went up to this one spot in the garage and looked and just looked over and thought, you know, if I jump from here, that would probably kill me. But it was only 4 or 5 stories up, so I didn't know for sure that it would. And I wanted to make sure there wasn't anybody walking, you know, by at that time. So, but I would just go up and fantasize about that. And I was taking a medication, but not as prescribed. Again, a narcotic. And at one point I started smoking weed again. So I would go up there and just kind of fantasize about that, and then go home. And it was finally before I was able to ask for help and to get sober, because there were so many things that are available to us that I know about now, that if you just go to a certain place, the place where I work now, you just go there and ask for help, you know, we will help you. I was, and I didn't think there's a treatment place in Cincinnati that I could have utilized, that I'd been to before. And none of these things were coming to mind. I didn't see any solutions. All I saw was the barriers. So it came to a point where I thought, all right, I'm either going to have to kill myself or somehow get off the alcohol and weed and the occasional pills by that point. And I would talk. I had a friend that I worked with, and I would go spend time with him and his boys some days, and he welcomed me over and stuff like that. And we talked a lot. And I told him that one day I said, you know, I think I'm gonna kill myself. And he said, you know, I think you're gonna do it, because he could just notice a change. And I didn't really want to. Some people say that they're cowards and won't do it because of that reason. I think I just felt like it was wrong, and I didn't really want to do that. That's not the way I wanted to go out. So he helped me get to the doctor, who sent me to the hospital, another doctor. That time it was interesting, because I was still trying to find the magic formula that would make me better, the chemical formula that would make me better. And I thought I'd come across it a few times over the years, but then it quit working pretty quickly. So, but the psychiatrist at the hospital where I went to, and it's funny because for my work, I go up there sometimes and I see the room where the big room where we all were. It brings back a little bit of memories, you know.
Did something happen? Did something happen to get you to that point? Did a life-altering event happen? Did something catastrophic? Because oftentimes we hear in the story of many is that you had to hit rock bottom, you know. And what was your rock bottom? What was that moment where You said, I'm getting away from the ledge. I'm being led to the hospital. I'm going to continue in this, because it's one thing to take an initial visit. You've said you've stopped and you started before.
Mhm.
But what was because how long have you been clean and sober today, as of today?
It's been 8 years, I think 5 months and 11 days.
And so that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
It's great.
Uninterrupted. So
Yeah.
what is it about now as different before, where you stopped and started and stopped and started, and to have this stretch now? What is it? What's your motivation? What helps you keep going and pressing through, not to return?
Okay. What helps me now to maintain this is it's a program of recovery. I'm involved in a 12-step program, and I've actually I've gone into it wholehearted.
Mhm.
I had thought when I was before I had quit, I thought that I need to get back to that, because I had been there before,
Mhm.
experienced the atmosphere and the recovery and things like that, and
Mhm.
the 12-step program, and I just couldn't seem to get there. I didn't have the strength.
Mhm.
Somehow with this incident with the hospital, the particular psychiatrist that told me that, no, I'm not going to give you that magic formula. There is no such thing.
Hmm.
He said, that's your problem, and so he sent me to what was then the Alcohol Council. Now it's the Addiction Services Council.
Hmm.
And so it was, at first it was just the fear and the desperation. I went to a lot of meetings. I went in the morning. I would go to a support meeting there at the council. I would go over to an AA clubhouse
Mhm.
that's close by there, maybe a block away.
Hmm.
I'd go there for the noon meeting, sit in on that, and then at night I would go to another meeting, and then to maybe a second meeting, or on the weekend they'd have 3 of them, and
Mhm.
I didn't know what else to do.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I knew to go back to it was suicide. Now, as far as what I think, when I had lost my job, when um, I had tested positive for one job, so I lost that. And then the other one, they lost the contract.
Mhm.
So I wasn't working anymore, and just not even able to go on an interview. There was no way I could sit.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
and the money was running out.
Mhm.
And
And so the employment kind of really woke you up.
that was a big deal. Yeah, that was a big deal. And I thought in my mind that I was living in Price Hill, and I had never jumped off into heroin,
Mhm.
but I knew it was around.
Mm.
And I knew that was kind of a what do you call it? Like a reservation. That was kind of a reservation. I thought, well, if I don't do that,
Mhm.
maybe I'll be okay. But I was getting to the point where it was like, man, maybe I should do that.
Mm.
And
Wow.
that was a wake up call too.
Wow.
There were just really a number of uh, coincidences, God moments, whatever. Just kind of stepped in and took my illusion of control out of the way, and I just was able to surrender enough to move on to the next step.
Wow. Wow. Well, we're grateful you fought through that, and that you're here to tell the story. Dr. Moss, hearing David's story, how common is it for those type of self-discussions to occur? People have those kind of discussions with themselves, and how common is that rationale David shared with us that was going through his mind as to whether to end it all, to whether to try something different and going back? How common is that kind of rationalization?
It's very common. It's unfortunately with the disease of addiction, people can have their brain hijacked. The area of the brain that deals with where these drugs have their effect They have communication to another area of the brain where we tend to reason, have executive functioning, have planning, kind of hijacks that area of the brain. So we start to prioritize different. We try to, distort what the risk reward of what we're doing. Oh, this won't hurt so bad, or I won't have that consequence, or that thing surely won't happen to me, though the evidence is right there in front of you that it's already happening. So our brain gets, unfortunately, distorted in its thinking in a very terrible way. When we think about alcohol use disorder, when we think about, opioid use disorder, which is very similar to alcohol use disorder, unfortunately, a lot of people succumb to that way of thinking.
And one of the things David shared was the fact that in his therapy or meeting the psychiatrist issued a challenge. How important is it to challenge someone in their flawed thinking, and to challenge them and confront them and helping them get better? How important it is for a trained professional like yourself to do that?
I think that I think everyone's different. Everyone's sense of motivation is different. How they're able to receive information is different. Back in the day in the field, it was all about confrontation. It was all about getting folks lined up, 7 to 8 people, and everybody's pointing fingers about what you're doing wrong and what you should be doing. And for most people, that is not effective. What we can do is that we can put forth the information that they're giving us about how they're doing, the status of their being, and then beside it, we can put forth what the patient has articulated what they want.
Wow.
And we help them to see sometimes where things are congruent, where they're the same, or we may help them to see where there are discrepancies, right? So that's part of what we do. But the confrontation days for most clients, it doesn't work well. Now we're in the venue of finding ways to support, and how can I help someone like David, find the customized intervention that's going to work exactly for him. God blessed that, the 12-step intervention for him was great, and getting to the meetings. And I think that works for most people. But for other people, it might be 12 steps, and it might be individual counselor, or maybe 12 steps and being in a faith-based program, or it may be a faith-based program, 12 steps and dealing with a little bit of medication to help me with my cravings. It may be some of all of that for a lot of people. And I'm just glad that there are a lot of options to be able to help folks.
Well, one of the things David shared was that basically having this disorder, being in recovery now, can threaten your life. And certainly there was a recent incident in Bowling Green University where a pledge was encouraged to drink a whole bottle, and it was encouraged by those that were pledging to drink a whole bottle of whiskey. And certainly in my day, it happened often. And the pledgee died of alcohol poison. How do you become poisoned by alcohol? What happens? I mean, because when you think poison, you think of something like something under the kitchen sink. You think of something that's been. How can one be poisoned by alcohol and succumb to alcohol poisoning? What happens to us?
In part, our body chemistries get, really way out of whack, so there are certain, chemicals that we have in our bodies like sodium and others that create a balance for us. So consuming a lot of alcohol affects that, but also consuming a lot of alcohol, much like we see with opioids, it diminishes our respiratory drive so that people can't take spontaneous respirations.
Wow.
Increasing the risk of going comatose. And those sometimes are very difficult to reverse. So this alcohol poisoning thing that we see a lot more in our younger population, particularly those who are at college or sometimes even in high school, typically on a dare or in grandstanding with a group. A lot of this occurs, but this can also occur with someone who has had a history of drinking, and they've pushed themselves to a place of drinking to, again, they depress their respiratory drive. So that's all possible with alcohol poisoning.
So David mentioned, and I've seen this happen. He mentioned that he fell asleep or blacked out. If a person blacks out, is that kind of a sign that things are kind of relaxing more?
Yeah, it is a dangerous sign. Actually, if someone drinks to the point that they pass out or they're unconscious, that means that they've accelerated their alcohol intake such that the concentration has gone very fast over a short period of time, much faster than our body can clear it. So one result might be that someone, loses consciousness or they fall asleep. But what also happens as often, and what is the true nature of the blackout, is that people will start to run on automatic pilot until they're conscious. So they'll continue to talk, they'll continue to laugh. Unfortunately, they'll even drive, and they have no understanding that they were actually doing it. And then the next day, they have no recall of what happened in that period of time. And that's what a true blackout is.
Wow. Well, with all of those facts and with all of those stories that have been reported, it doesn't slow down those who are in the business of selling alcohol at all. In fact, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that every year, $2 billion is used in advertisement. Because obviously, the more advertisements that are put out, the more people drink and the more they make money, regardless of what the consequences are. And unfortunately, some of the communities that are affected more are Black and brown communities, are places of lower income. Because David mentioned Price Hill, because in those areas, they'll put a lot of drive-throughs there, they'll put a lot of liquor stores, and there have been studies, study after study after study has been conducted. It has been proven that there are a disproportionate amount of drive-throughs and liquor stores in impoverished areas.
Yep.
And a report done by National Public Radio a few years ago indicated that in lower income neighborhoods, there's a lot more people that don't drink or don't drink at all, as opposed to more affluent neighborhoods where there's a steady drinking that's moderate, but in lower incomes is excessive drinking. And the percentage of those who drink in excess is higher in lower income groups. And the alcohol industry has become clever in its advertisement to make the drinking in excess more acceptable. And here's an ad that was put out by Hennessy, which for many people is a self-declared #1 liquor whiskey for the African American community. Here's a very clever ad that Hennessy put out.
He trained his mind among the Black Bear School of Chess. Some came to sow seeds of doubt.
I don't know why you're looking at me. You should be looking at the board. He's not even looking at the board, so I guess I should be afraid. But guess what? I'm not looking at the board neither. Ain't no magic here. There's no magic here. Magic's for fools that want to be tricked. How many moves left? How many moves left? Tap, move, tap. What you think? You want to come inside my house? How about come in your house?
Oh! Others for the blood, head to hand to piece the clock.
You move.
And some laid traps.
Unaware of the danger, this flies like a man flying blind.
Sees you reaching for your piece, hand trembling, and he's got you. And through defeat, he learned to dive again and again. You could beat every bear in the forest, but the game is never finished.
I mean, you look at that and it's like, wow, wow, wow. Oh, Hennessy? You know, we're celebrating the fact that the young man is a grandmaster in chess, you know, and then we take his story and we link it to the history and legacy of Hennessy. Dave, as you look back over, as you look at your life now in recovery, why should folks that may have listened to you tonight or will listen to your story, some folks, as they listen to your story, they will see where they are along their journey. Why is it necessary for them to hold out hope?
Because there is hope. I had felt like I'd lost hope, and even when I started on this course of sobriety, I had some people that even what I heard was, you know, you're too old, you might as well get ready to retire now. And I found out that that's not true. You know, so even if you're older and decide to quit using drugs or quit drinking because of the way it affects your life, the quality of life improves so much. I mean, there's things that I'm doing now that I maybe had dreamed about doing when I was younger. Certainly, you know, you couldn't become a grandmaster by drinking Hennessy. That would be the easy way to do it, right? But I found that by putting aside the alcohol and the other drugs, that I'm actually able to live a life that's what they say, a life worth living. It's worth every effort. You know.
That's awesome. Dr. Moss, as we prepare tonight to end our session, why should more attention be given to this disorder? And why should people take this serious? We're consumed with the opiate epidemic.
Yeah.
We know how rampant that is. We're introduced to things like, in our terminology now, Narcan.
Yeah.
But we have Hennessy. So why should we take the abuse and drinking and excess of alcohol seriously tonight as we close?
You know, much like it, you know, we see with the opioid epidemic, you know, unfortunately, people die from this. You know, we have almost 100,000 people who die each year. You know, there are more people who die from alcohol than from the opioid epidemic. You know, opioid epidemic needs attention, but man, we have a lot of people dying from alcohol use. So there's a lot of work to be done. We know that when children, you know, people who are younger than 18 get exposed to alcohol, it changes their trajectory. Then those kids are more likely to start to abuse other things, and their brains are maturing and changing even as a late teen. And introducing alcohol in the mix creates a much more difficult disease to treat for them, even as an adult. And if you think about the number of years that are lost, you know, across this country, you know, secondary to alcohol, it does need attention. You know, and we need to think differently about how we market it and how we sell it, and you know, how we appraise it. Should we have alcohol in our culture? It has its place, but we don't do enough in educating people about its risk. And everyone's risk with this alcohol is also different.
Because many children's first exposure to alcohol is in the home, and it starts with, "Hey, go get daddy a beer."
Yeah.
Hand touches it and they see the effect. We want to thank you, Dave, for just being real and sharing your journey and your new life in recovery. And we pray that that will continue. And though we may not be in touch with you, just know that we're praying for you.
All right.
Thank you tonight for making your time tonight.
Thanks for
Dr.
having me.
Moss, thanks again, Dr. Moss, as always, for your insight. And to our viewers, we want to thank you for taking time out tonight. And as always, we want you to feel better, become better, and live better. Till next time, God bless you and good night.